Hey, Latino Vote podcast listeners, this is Mike Madrid here. We're launching a new series called Voices with prominent leaders in the Latino community who have left an indelible mark on the story of our people, the impact of our vote, and the policies that affect us directly. We're launching this program, first and foremost, with a California politician by the name of Kevin de León. If you're in California, you've certainly heard of Kevin. If you're a part of our national audience, let me introduce you to him very briefly. Kevin de León was the first Latino to lead the California State Senate, where he passed landmark legislation on climate and climate policy, as well as a bill known as SB 54, the California Values Act, or otherwise known as the Sanctuary State Bill. It's really been put in the crosshairs of the Trump administration as California leads the way to protect the undocumented and the rights of the undocumented here. We start this interview with his trajectory going from his climb up through his struggles to get a college education, his eventual engagement with politics, and then his rapid meteoric rise to running for the California State Assembly, California State Senate, and ultimately towards the controversial crescendo of one of the most cataclysmic moments in Los Angeles City Council history, where under the leadership of former Los Angeles City Councilwoman President Nuri Martinez, a racially charged conversation came out that redefined the contours of racial politics in California. Here's the interview. Kevin, it's great to see you, brother. It's been a long time.
Mike, it's been a while.
I think I was thinking about the last time I saw you. Could it be as long back as when you were considering running for LA City Council?
You know, it's a good question. That would have been 5 years ago,
It's like five. I think that's probably right.
2020.
Yeah, I think we had dinner somewhere near downtown LA. And just, again, kind of talking about the future. Seems like every time we get together, we're talking about the future and the world and what it means.
You have a good memory, but I can tell you one right now, your future is a present because you've been blowing up all over the country.
I don't know about that.
Not just here in California, but with Chuck.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good to see your ascendancy. It's good to see you talking about the issues that are really critical, but issues that, quite frankly, are brushed over or
Yeah.
not even, spoken about.
Yeah.
Especially with mainstream media, even the political elite, if you will. So, congrats, man.
No,
Felicidades.
I appreciate that. And I've always appreciated kind of the ability to just kind of sit down and talk about stuff. When you were leading the Senate, you were always had an open door with this kind of weird Republican guy, and you listened to me a little bit. Listen, but I don't know if you heard me, but you listened to me. Uh, and um, and that's like I said, you've just kind of been that kind of person, that kind of leader. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you sitting down today and doing this with us.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanna start by and again, this is a national audience. All of our
Okay.
Californians here
Okay.
know you well. We'll talk about some of those issues, but the emergence of the Latino electorate, Latino politicians invariably leads to kind of I don't want to say our generation because I've been kind of an observer, but you've been actually in the arena kind of driving policy, leading legislative efforts, stuff specifically as it relates to the undocumented at this moment in time. Environmental policies in this state in California have been huge. But I want to kind of back up a little bit more
Mhm.
because there are a lot of people nationally that are hearing about you for the first time and kind of get a sense of who you are and why you sought a career in public service. Because you've had a lifelong friendship with a lot of Latino politicians here in California. You're still good friends with them. But talk to us about, what made you decide Políticas was somehow something you wanted to do.
Well, that I think that's a very good question because I never thought in my wildest dreams, I never fathomed the thought I'd ever become a politician or elected official because it's something that I never aspired to do. It's something I never pined for. I wasn't a an assistant or a staffer to a politician, a member of
Mhm.
Congress, a senator, assembly member, council member, mayor. I was never a fellow or an intern. And I'm the youngest child of a single immigrant mother, third grade education, was the first one to graduate from high school
Hmm,
in my family. I was the only one to graduate from high school
I didn't know that.
in my family. Suffice it to say, I was the only one to go on to college. But when I went on to college, I even got kicked out. I was a product of affirmative action. Without affirmative action, I can tell you with complete certainty,
Mhm.
I would not be here today, or the policies that I was in a privileged position to move forward with a sense of political force. I'm not saying they would not have come to fruition with perhaps someone else, but I would never have been in a position without affirmative action. But I never thought. My mother was a housekeeper, very wealthy enclaves in San Diego,
Mhm.
La Jolla, Mission Hills,
Yeah.
Coronado. She was a woman who worked her fingers to the bone. My aunt, my tia, who's still alive today, she's 87. She was like my second mother.
Yeah.
She worked her fingers to the bone. So we were renters all of our life. Um, very humble neighborhood in San Diego,
Yep.
Barrio Logan, Logan
That's
Heights,
where you grew up.
Barrio Sherman, yeah,
Barrio Logan.
there, and in Tijuana, the border town. So it's kind of being a fronterizo. You're kind of
Hmm.
like bicultural.
Of
You're kind of
course.
like bilingual. You're kind of going back and forth, between the borders. Maybe folks who live in the border in Texas and Texas have that experience, and Sonora as well too, with Arizona, with Chihuahua in Texas. So it's that border experience, which is it's very different. It was a time when the Arellano brothers, which you see on Netflix,
Hmm.
were Benjamin, um, Felix, all these folks were big in Tijuana. A lot of drug cartel murders, massacres, a lot of the grotesque stuff that we're seeing today was really,
Yeah, in
really
that
happening.
era.
Yeah, back in those days. So I kind of grew up in that environment.
So when does politics come into play?
What happened was is that I went to the University of California at Santa Barbara. And suffice it to say, I always believed I was intelligent enough, but I didn't know how to organize myself to write a paper, complete a
Yeah.
sentence. I was in remedial classes for English, for example, when I got admitted to UC Santa Barbara. Suffice it to say, in the second quarter, first quarter, I was on academic probation. Second quarter, I was put on academic probation. Third quarter, I was put on academic probation.
Mm,
And so what happens is that, and I don't know if it's policy, what it's like today, but you're in effect, you're kind of kicked out of school.
right.
You're expelled, your financial aid is taken away from you. And I was really embarrassed. I didn't know what to
Were
do.
you trying and weren't able to do it, or was
I
it,
was
like,
I
the
was
lack of structure
trying.
part of it too?
Yeah.
You're partying a little bit too much, hanging out too much?
It's a
Because I did
combination.
that.
Yeah. It's a combination of all.
Yeah.
Why am I gonna lie?
Yeah.
It's a
No, no, that's
combination.
fine. It's we're being young.
You live in a dormitory, then you live
Yeah.
in Isla Vista.
If you don't grow up understanding what a college is, you're kinda thrown into a whole new world, and without a lack of structure, a lot of us flail.
Yeah.
That's not uncommon.
Especially with me, there was a real lack of structure. I want to say that there were support groups there without a doubt, but it was very difficult for me still
Yeah.
nonetheless. And uh, uh, I was embarrassed. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to go back home because I knew right away my mother would be asking, like, "Pues, ¿qué estás haciendo aquí? What are you doing here?" And,
Yeah.
I was going to say, "Hey, Mom, I already graduated. I was on the fast track. I graduated 1 year. You got a really smart son. I didn't know what to do."
Right.
So for
Right.
about a year and a half, I was what would be defined today. I was homeless. I slept on the couches of my friends. I slept in the car. I didn't have a place because I didn't have any financial means to rent a room,
In Santa Barbara or
in
just
Santa
all around?
Barbara,
Yeah.
and Goleta and Isla
Yep.
Vista.
Yep.
So a friend who we know, named Fabian Nunez,
Yeah.
went to UC San Diego and left school. And he was working for an organization called One Stop Immigration and Educational Center, based in Boyle Heights on the corner of Esperanza and Whittier Boulevard. And he was working out in Pomona. And he became a director of the One Stop Immigration Center in Pomona. They were offering English classes, civics, U.S. history, filling out paperwork for those who are legalizing their status from being undocumented immigrants. So he said to me, "Hey, why don't you
How did you
what
know Fabian?
Fabian? We grew up together in the
Okay.
same
In
neighborhood.
San Diego.
Yeah, we grew up in the same neighborhood. We went to the same high school." And Fabian says, "Well, why don't you teach? Why don't you teach English?" And my first reply was, "Dude, I just got kicked out of school. I
Yeah.
can't teach anybody anything. I don't have the skill set."
Yeah.
I said, "No, no, no, no. You can do it. We have a curriculum here. You follow the structure and the curriculum. You can do it." And I didn't believe in myself. And he was like, "Yeah, you can
Hmm.
do it. Trust me." And long story short, I had maybe 3 students, adults. These were adults, by the
Yeah.
way. These were immigrants. And then I had to, get un pizarrón that the day is I know they have whiteboards. It was a chalkboard,
Yeah.
una caja de gis, a box of, chalk,
Chalk. Mm.
and I found a place that was kind of abandoned, and in Isla Vista. I had about maybe 3 students, maybe about 4 or 5 students, and then word of mouth because in Isla Vista and Santa Barbara is a very wealthy enclave, of course.
Yeah.
Montecito, the Riviera, Hope Ranch. But when you have very wealthy people, you also have the working poor who
To
service
support that.
the very wealthy
Yeah.
people who support it. Exactly. And then you have a lot of agriculture workers, the nurseries,
Hmm.
avocados, and so forth, and the vineyards up in Santa Barbara County. So a lot of immigrants, a lot of undocumented immigrants, a lot of Mexican, Salvadoran, Filipino undocumented immigrants. And word started getting around, and I realized that at the time, under Ronald Reagan, this is past 1986, but we have the Immigration Reform Control Act of 1986,
Hmm.
and it was barely going into effect many, many years after it passed in Washington, D.C.
Right.
So on a per head basis, you could get reimbursed. So I did the calculation, and I said, I can actually expand.
Hmm.
So I did something which is, I would think it was kind of crazy. Ignorance is bliss is a big sort of a philosophy for me. I went into Santa Barbara on Milpa Street. I rented the top floor of a building. Quite frankly, the owners of the building probably had no business renting it to me at all whatsoever.
Right.
But I was able to talk myself into it. I was about maybe 20 years old at the time. And I needed students. So what am I gonna do? So I started going to like the hotels during the break hours, started going to the nurseries. I started going into the avocado ranches. And then there is a high school called Santa Barbara High School. And at the time, there was only two institutions that could provide this type of instruction. They were community colleges or the adult education wing of high school districts or unified school districts. So at the time, it was Santa Barbara City College, which is a very good city community
Hmm.
college. And at Santa Barbara High School, at nighttime, Monday through Thursdays, the campus would be packed, parking lot with adult immigrants, getting their ESL classes to qualify to become a legal permanent resident, because that was part of the criteria. Long story short, I would like print volantes, flyers at nighttime. I would go to Santa Barbara High School in the parking lot and put the flyers under the windshields, and I would stand in front of the doors at 9 p.m. As soon as the doors open up, I would say, hola, buenas noches, señor. Buenas noches, señora. ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? Yo soy Kevin de León. Yo doy clases de inglés, e historia, civismo, mucho más mejor que ellos. Yo hablo español, yo lleno los papeles, tomo las fotos, las huellas, etcétera, etcétera, etcétera. Hi, my name is Kevin de León. I teach history too, and civics and ESL, and I teach classes much better than they do here. I speak Spanish. I'll fill out all your paperwork. I'll take your fingerprints, your photographs. I'll send it to the immigration.
Hustling, man.
So I was
Building a
poaching.
base,
Yeah,
building a client base.
I was
But it
poaching.
worked.
Yeah, but it worked because it started getting around the community, and I went to
To early organizing efforts.
yes, my early organized efforts, and I went back to UC Santa Barbara not as a student, but to talk to like, hey, if you were my friend back then, hey, Mike, you know what? Do you want to teach ESL? I will give you the curriculum. I'll give you the standards. I'll give you the classroom. I will pay you minimum wage
Yeah, yeah,
at the
yeah.
time,
Right.
yeah. And all you have to do is you have to show up Monday through Thursday, 6 to 9 p.m. You cannot party and show up, half drunk or with a
Yeah.
major hangover. These are adults who are their lives are in our hands because they need the certification to become legal permanent residents. At
Yeah.
that time it was INS,
Hmm.
Immigration Naturalization Service.
What year is this? This is late 80s.
The 90s. This is early 90s. Early 90s.
91, 92, 93.
Yeah, 90s. Had about 500 students on any given
Oh,
night.
wow.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we grew big time. And um it's why I cut my teeth politically. It was the best years of my life, I
Hmm.
can tell you, because we had no money and we were sleeping on the floor. And this is all verifiable.
Yeah, yeah,
Sleeping on the
yeah.
floor,
Yeah.
taking cold showers because we had no hot water. I slept in the office along with other friends. We slept in the office. And it was a passion. We loved it. Ignorance is bliss. We were getting paid no money, hardly any money at all whatsoever. Didn't have enough money to survive and live in a town like Santa Barbara,
Right.
but it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. I think it was from those organizing days that I never thought I would actually be involved in,
Yeah.
that I didn't work for a union per se and cut my teeth politically at a union or was an intern or fellow for a politician or a union. That's where I cut my teeth politically. And then I remember I didn't know how to write a press release. So I called the assembly member at the time was Jack O'Connell, who eventually became
Remember?
superintendent of public instruction.
Yeah.
And I called his office. I said, "Hey, do you guys have a press release you guys can send me?" "Well, what kind of press release?" "Just any press release."
It's the format.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't even know what format.
Right.
And they had faxes back
Faxes.
then. So they
Yeah.
faxed me a press release. Then I saw, okay, the name goes here. It's a phone number. It says contact. You have a big headline here. The font is bigger and it's in bold. Then you have a kicker here. Then you have the name of the town here. And then there was 3 pound signs, and I didn't understand what the pound signs were. And I called, "Hey, excuse me, there's 3 pound signs here. What are
Mhm.
these 3 pound signs here?" He says, "Oh, that means it stops, it
The end.
finishes. It's
Yeah.
the end, finito." Okay, 3 pound signs. So I just copied the format, and once up immigration, calls out, police abuse, whatever, on this issue and that issue, the targeting of immigrants, blah, 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 blah. And it was an amazing period. We legalized tens of thousands of people. After that, we naturalized
Mhm.
the N-400 form, tens of thousands of people. The I-90s, we renewed what we call the green cards, legal permanent residency. The N-400's naturalization, citizenship. The I-130 is legal permanent residency. We took
So this
fingerprints,
process has been part of your DNA from the
yes,
very beginning.
without a doubt.
This
Yeah,
gets and so ultimately, and we're gonna get to the political history too, but I wanna talk about a real timely topic now, which is SB 54,
sanctuary state,
Sanctuary State Bill. Is
the
it SB
California
54?
Values Act. Yes,
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. So it's a Sanctuary State Bill,
yeah.
which is really kind
As
of
deemed by the media, by the way. We always called it the California Values Act, but
tell me
because
what it is.
the California Values Act, obviously back in 2016, when
Donald Trump first becomes president.
Donald Trump becomes president, I think everyone was shocked across the political spectrum. I think even Republicans were shocked. I think even Donald Trump
Donald
was
Trump was shocked,
shocked,
sure.
that he was elected through the Electoral College to become the
And you're
president
the
of the United States.
president pro tem of the Senate of California.
I'm the leader of the California State Senate,
Yep.
and I was in shock. I saw the reaction from my staff. Was in shock. I remember precisely. I was in downtown Los Angeles. We had a war room set up at then it was called the Ace Hotel.
Mhm.
Well, we had a whole war room operation there, in one of the rooms there with all the staff, all the TV screens, the whole bit. You can imagine. You've been in plenty of them before.
Mhm.
Um, and we wake up Wednesday morning and you're in shock. You don't know what to do. I had a planned trip to go to Germany on Thursday to meet with various ministers in the environment space to engage in talks about climate change. And I canceled the trip. And I didn't. I didn't know what role I played. It was kind of in a twilight zone. But I made the decision when there was news coverage of elementary school kids who were crying. They were literally bawling.
Yeah.
The reason why I stayed was that, in this bipartisan world that we live in today, in the American body politic, when Barack Obama was elected president back in 2008, I don't recall the children of conservative Republicans bawling or crying. Conversely, when George W. Bush was elected president, I don't recall the children of Democrats, even the most far left leaning progressive Democrats, bawling or crying, fearful of George W. Bush.
Right.
This was different.
Yep.
And being the child of a single immigrant mother, family members who were undocumented as well too. I still have some family members today who are undocumented, and it's not a reflection of them. It's a reflection of the broken system
Sure.
in Congress. It's and the lack of courage for members of Congress to do what's should have been done decades ago. And uh, I stayed, and I issued out a joint statement within the Speaker of the Assembly. I spoke with Jerry Brown maybe phew, about 5 in the morning. We had a conversation that Wednesday morning.
Brown's the governor at the time in
Jerry
California.
Brown was governor at the time. I called for an executive meeting with all of my top executive staff members. And I said, listen, this is uncharted territory, but we have to figure out statutorily. That's Congress. They make the laws and regulatory and executive orders. How can we protect California? A woman's right to choose. How can we protect undocumented immigrants who contributed greatly? That's why we're the fifth largest economy, GDP on planet Earth,
Mhm.
because of them.
Mhm.
They don't get the credit enough. Uh, Um, and how do we protect our very progressive climate change policies, our environmental policies? So we talked for a couple weeks, and then the idea was born of the California Values Act, how we will prohibit local law enforcement agencies, local police departments, LAPD, San Francisco, San Jose, Sacramento, Fresno, Bakersfield, so forth, county sheriffs,
You
as
had a
well
lot
as
of support
highway.
from law enforcement for the
From
big city.
big city, yeah,
Yeah,
and
because
that yeah,
policing's different in big cities than it is in rural or suburban areas.
I would say without a doubt, but I also say that engaging police chiefs
Yeah.
who are appointed, they are selected,
Mhm.
as opposed to county sheriffs that
Are
are
elected.
elected.
Got it.
Yeah, and I've never believed that county sheriffs, or for that matter, even district attorneys, should be elected
Mhm.
because they become very political in
Right.
their decision making.
Mhm.
And I think that was really uh, reflective of the negotiations with Senate Bar, I should say SB 54, the Secretary of State bill. I did work with police chiefs. I did engage. Then Police Chief Charlie Beck brought an issue to me
From Los
from
Angeles.
Los Angeles that was I didn't know, and I listened to him, and we evolved. He said, "Listen, the way the language is written with sanctuary state, it would prohibit us as local law enforcement agencies from cooperating with federal task force. Say if you have a task force that has alcohol, tobacco, firearms, the FBI, DEA, and local police departments, and they're dealing with someone who's a drug trafficker. They're dealing with someone who maybe is a mastermind of workers' comp fraud,
Right.
tens of billions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, and you have ICE involved in it, it would prohibit us from engaging because ICE is part of the task force.
Mhm.
Usually, when you have a task force that's targeting someone, or usually when there is an arrest warrant, it usually means the person or persons are up to really no good. They're not
Mhm.
good folks. So then you make the changes as necessary. You have to engage because you have to deal first and foremost for the public safety of all individuals, regardless of who they are and where they come from. So we don't live in a world of absolutes. So obviously, Senate Bill 54 was very controversial. Um, I received a lot of death threats,
Mhm.
a ton of death threats.
This is in 2017
This is
now.
2017.
So Trump is newly
2017.
off of the whole MAGA movement, which is a lot more vociferous, violent, angry. I was getting those death threats in
Yeah,
some of my
yeah,
work
yeah.
too. I mean, I know what you're
This
talking
is not
about.
this is not George Herbert Walker
This is
Bush.
not your
This is not
it's
George
not your
W. Bush.
this is not your George W. Bush's
Yeah.
Republican Party. This is something entirely different. Uh, it passes.
It passes. It
With
passes.
support, split in law enforcement. There are some that
Split
are
law
saying
enforcement.
yes. There are some that accommodate it, like LA Police
The
Chief
county
Beck.
sheriffs. The county sheriffs are coming after it big
The
time.
sheriffs hate
They
this.
hate it.
The
They're coming
elected,
after it.
yeah,
Yeah. The elected, the political ones.
yeah. The appointed police chiefs are like, yeah, let's do this. We can make this work.
Yeah. What I gathered, what I ascertained from police chiefs were that they were concerned that undocumented immigrant families would not be picking up the phone if they were
Makes
victims of
sense.
crime or if they were witness to a crime, which makes sense to your point.
Well, it also makes them subjects to being trafficked, right? If they're not going to call the police, you can easily quickly become a victim that's not going to report a crime.
You become a target,
Yeah,
to be exploited.
and so this becomes law for the better part of now 7, 8 years.
It becomes odd 7 years, but almost immediately thereafter,
Yeah.
then Attorney General Jeff Sessions flew out from Washington, D.C., came out to California.
Oh, we did.
Yes, and he flew out to Sacramento, to be very specific, to hold a press conference. And he denounced Senate Bill 54 as unconstitutional. He denounced it as an affront to law enforcement and to the federal government of then the Trump administration. Trump won.
Mhm.
And the Department of Justice sued sued
The state.
California, deeming that Senate Bill 54 was unconstitutional. Now, I wrote Senate Bill 54 with my excellent staff, my chief of staff, Dan Reeves, Alexandra Salgado, who's from Huntington Park,
Hmm.
went to Stanford University, a very humble young Latina woman. And we wrote it together with then Attorney General. I'm sorry, not then Attorney General, but former Attorney General Eric Holder from
Mhm.
Department of Justice.
Right.
I had hired Eric Holder, so you had a black man and a Latino man working together to produce sanctuary state measure. And even when Jeff Sessions and Trump were vilifying me and vilifying the bill as being unconstitutional, we always made it very clear that we were never prohibiting ICE agents from executing what federal law is. Law, immigration law, is made by the House of Representation, which is the Congress and the U.S. Senate. Statutorily, they make the laws. The administration executes the laws. Now, as abhorrent as I may find it, ICE agents, going after folks, especially hardworking, vulnerable folks, I also recognize and understand that to a large degree, we cannot prohibit them from executing what the laws are on the books.
Right.
But what we can say is that we won't lift a single finger or spend a single cent to be a cog in the Trump deportation machine,
Right.
meaning specifically that local law enforcement, county sheriffs, as well as highway patrol, state, local agencies will not cooperate. In effect, they cannot be deputized, be an extension of the Trump deportation machine.
Right.
And they cannot be commandeered,
Yeah.
There's part of the amendment of the Constitution.
Yeah.
That federal government cannot commandeer and force you to do X, Y, and Z. And if you don't, well, we will withdraw funding. We will threaten you.
Punish you somehow. We'll leverage you.
We did our research, so we
Yeah.
felt good. And interestingly, they sued us. We were the case was heard by a Republican judge.
Yeah.
Eastern District up in Sacramento. We won the case there. We went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. We won the case there. I know a lot of folks will say, well, of course, it's the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It is what it is. But we went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Oh, it did go to the Supreme Court.
We went to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Were you there for the hearing?
I was not there for the hearing at the
Oh.
U.S. Supreme Court, but I was so busy. I don't know what I was doing at the time. They had it on their docket, but the justices made a decision not to hear the case,
Okay.
which was a blow to then Attorney General Jeff Sessions
Yeah.
and the Trump administration.
Yeah.
So what it did, it validated, and it was victorious for us.
Right.
Now, whether they attempt to do so with the current makeup of the U.S. Supreme Court, I don't know. But one thing is very important to note, that many of the Supreme Court justices that are currently on the Supreme Court were present at the time
Right.
the measure made its way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. Say for maybe one or two individuals, it was a conservative majority at the time that they
And
had
they chose not to pull it up
chose
and
not
hear
to
it.
hear it. Yeah,
That's a sign of something.
yeah, because it's not unconstitutional. We're not prohibiting you from enforcing federal immigration law. What
We're
we're
just not gonna
saying
be
is
part
this.
of it.
Yeah, we're not going to be part of it.
Yeah.
Because these are local tax. If Mike Madrid is a California taxpayer, and Mike Madrid is paying his taxes, state and local taxes, his expectation is to be protected and to be served by local law enforcement. Not that Sacramento Police Department is going to be an extension, if you will.
Right. Of course.
Now, of course, if you're a bad guy, there are provisions. Certain heinous crimes are captured into are captured where you can collaborate with the federal authorities.
And that's all in the bill.
That's all in the bill.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did any other states?
Yes. We were
Other
the
states
first state.
followed?
Yes, we were the first state
Okay.
in the nation.
How many?
Más
Más o menos.
New York, Illinois,
Hmm.
I think Oregon and Washington. Off the top of my head, I know that Illinois did a great job. So
So where
did,
are we at
New
now?
York.
Trump 2 comes in, and I know this issue's been resurrected.
Yeah.
A lot of focus and attention on you because of the original thinking. You were the prime mover on all of this. Where are we at right now with sanctuary state legislation?
Well, sanctuary state legislation, the law is the law, the state of California. So whether Trump likes it or not, whether his new attorney general likes it or not, it is the law, and it should be enforced. Now, that being said, let me be very clear about something. If there's sheriffs in particular up and down the state of California, the 58 counties, who don't like sanctuary states, I know there are.
Yeah.
Who don't want to enforce or adhere, it's up to the public. It's up to the, organizations to call it, because if there are law enforcement agents who are not adhering to the law, they're in effect breaking the law,
Mhm.
and it'd be up to the attorney general to enforce that. What is the mechanism? Like when folks talk about, are we going to have a constitutional crisis if a federal judge or if the U.S. Supreme Court says, Mr. Trump, you cannot do X, Y, and Z, and we prohibit you from doing it. But the federal courts and the U.S. Supreme Court don't have a mechanism to enforce what their ruling is. The U.S. Supreme Court nor the federal courts have their own law enforcement agents. If I say, Mike Madrid, I prohibit you from doing X, Y, Z, and Mike Madrid does X, Y, and Z.
Hmm.
The courts don't have, the ability. So that's the debate, the topic about constitutional crisis, and will Trump even recognize it? So in the same case, homicide is a felony,
Right.
but people still commit homicides
Yes.
on a daily
Of
basis.
course.
So it is up to the people of the state of California when they see that the law is not being adhered to by law enforcement agents. It's really important that they report it
So,
immediately.
so do you think that this will be challenged again by the Trump administration? Do you think they'll, with a new court, one or two new members, they'll try and push it up and see if they'll take it again?
That's a very good question.
You don't know. Haven't heard anything, seen anything?
I would have no doubt that they would challenge it. I believe that we're in strong constitutional ground. That foundation is firm, it's
Mhm,
solid.
mhm.
But I have no doubt that they will make a challenge. I think that's why it's really important that when we protect, see, these are driven by my decision making is informed the way I grew up
Right.
and my family in other families like mine. My family is not unique per se, or my story. It's not necessarily original. It's a story of tens of millions of immigrants and the children of immigrants, right? So my story is not an original story per se. Um,
It's
but
remarkable
yeah,
because it's not remarkable.
yeah.
Right?
But I'm informed by my decision
Yeah, of
making. I
course.
will
Create
say
who you
I
are.
won't go into details,
Yeah.
but there's even a lot of Democratic colleagues who did not want to move this bill forward.
When you were running the
Yeah,
Senate,
yeah,
there
yeah,
was
yeah,
there was consternation even in the Democratic Party.
yeah. Even within the Democratic Party,
Okay.
I think we have a tendency to be supportive of immigrants publicly through statements, but when it comes to action, we tend to have amnesia. It's almost 40 years now, and we don't have immigration reform. We've had the executive branch, we've had the bicameral legislative branch,
Few
both
times.
the U.S. Senate as well as the House of Representatives. And somehow, some way, all of a sudden, when we campaigned for immigration reform to legalize a sizable undocumented population that had been here for years, if not decades,
Right.
who've been contributing, you know, breaking their backs to build this economy to be the number one GDP on planet Earth, all of a sudden amnesia hits us,
Yeah.
and I'm saying, "Oh, we can't do it this year, we'll try to do this next year." And, well, we gotta do it in the first 2 years. You don't do it in the first 2 years,
It ain't gonna get done.
when the midterms come, the old switcheroo always
You're
happens,
gonna lose the House,
is
lose the
yeah,
Senate.
we lose the House or lose the Senate or lose one of the, bodies or both bodies. So that's always been a big disappointment, for me.
And that could have happened, in the Clinton years in '93. It could have happened in the Obama years in 2009. It could have happened in the Biden years during, in
2022.
2022.
Yeah.
And both all of those were missed opportunities, which brings me to I think another question I wanna ask you because you were right in the middle of this nationally in 2017 with pushing this legislation forward and pushing the Democratic Party to vote. Like, where are you at? Right? To your point, are I know there's consternation, I know this might be a tough vote, but are we going to say we are who are we going to be who we say we are? Um, in 1994, Proposition 187,
Mm.
Dianne Feinstein,
I forgot all about that.
right,
Yeah.
somebody you would later challenge, in the
Yeah.
United States Senate, in a primary, was a pretty hawkish on these issues. There were a lot of Democrats who were there. The state of California was overwhelmingly for Proposition 187.
Yeah.
Latinos were the only group really that in measurable numbers voted against it. 2017 pops up, you see that same, up to a lesser degree, no question. Um, there's a split in the Democratic Party is, "Can we do this? Should we not do this?" We see what happens, years later, 8 years, 4 or 5 years later with Joe Biden kind of going, "What do we do on the border here? Things are kind of getting out of control. Are they out of control? Do we support the Langford bill, which is basically a Republican bill?" Um, and now we find ourselves with Latinos themselves shifting to the right on a lot of issues, but this one included. Is that a fair would you agree with that characterization?
I think it's a fair, yeah, assessment.
And why is
Mm.
that?
I have a friend, a good friend, uh, Latino, and his parents are from Jalisco,
Mhm.
and proud of being Mexican, Mexican origin. Um, his brother, and his brother-in-law who's also uh, of Mexican origin. They voted for Barack Obama in '08 proudly, excitedly. It's such a transformative candidacy.
Mm.
They voted for Barack Obama in 2012, his reelect. They voted for Hillary Clinton, could have possibly been the first woman in the history of the United States. Claudia Sheinbaum did it in Mexico. They did it before we did, the United States.
Mhm.
They voted for Joe Biden in 2020. So Barack Obama '08, Barack Obama reelect 2012, Hillary Clinton 2016, Joe Biden 2020.
Mhm.
Fast forward 4 years, 2024, they both voted for Donald Trump. And it was such a major departure from their voting patterns of the past.
Mhm.
And I think that we have to take a real deep, and I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said,
Mhm.
a deep examination of who we are as a political party, what are the issues that are critical, and ultimately, what is our role? I do believe strongly that our role is to win elections, because when you win elections, you're in a position of power to effectuate the change that is reflected by your values, by your principles. If you're not winning elections, and if you're not in a position of power, then you're relegated to the sidelines. In this case, in 2025, we have been pretty much relegated to the sidelines. This electoral college victory, a popular vote victory, and I hear folks, and I get a kick out of it. Well, he barely won the popular vote by a fraction, by a hair. Who cares? He won.
Yeah.
They have control of the House. They have control of the U.S. Senate. They have control of the U.S. Supreme Court. It's a trifecta. And they're running roughshod. And we have been relegated to the sidelines. And my concern is the hemorrhaging, if you will. Uh, the point made a few moments ago with regards to these two Latino men, Latina women, African American women have been largely strong in both cases in 2016 and in 2024. I believe, if the data is correct, that the majority of white women went with Trump.
That's right.
So I think we have to have a deep reflection, because um, my fear is we're going to continue to hemorrhage
Mhm.
if we don't make major course corrections.
What are those corrections? What does it need? What does the party need to do?
I think we have to deal on the issue of the economy.
Mhm.
We have to deal on issues and how we deal with inflation. We have to deal with issues of still climate change. Climate change is not a cultural issue. Climate change scientifically is an issue that's going to impact all individuals, regardless of who you are and where you come from, whether you come from a red state or you come from a blue state,
Sure.
but
Can't
how
be an either or
it's not
proposition.
either or. We don't live in a world of absolutes, but
Right.
like, for example, on the issue of climate change, the
Mhm.
issue of climate change is how do we convert it to an economy that grows and employs individuals and meaningful employment, so you have the ability to put a roof over your family's head, put the clothes on your children's back, put food on the table. So some of the stuff is basic,
Yeah.
and but yet it's fundamental to one's survivability to exist, as an ordinary human being, as an
Right.
ordinary citizen in the largest GDP on planet Earth. And if we're becoming more polarized, not just culturally, not just politically, but economically
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
that's a huge danger. And that's why I see us hemorrhaging, more people of color. That's a danger sign. That's a red flag. That's a canary in the coal mine.
Right.
And if we continue to ignore it, we will seal our fate to be the minority party in perpetuity. And that's not a good place to
Do
be
you
at.
think that I know you're saying the Democratic Party generally, and I agree with you, has been doing its level best against some significant headwinds to move kind of government towards that direction on the environment. You've been a national leader on that. Do you regret not having a stronger working class agenda as the leader of the Senate? Could this have been avoided?
I will say this is that when I made California a 100% clean, renewable energy state,
Yeah.
and I did so as part of the resistance, if you will, but not just a resistance on a social media platform or a hashtag saying, but something that was profoundly meaningful. And I thank my colleagues in the Senate as well as my colleagues in the Assembly for being highly supportive, my excellent staff,
Yeah.
Kip Lipper and a bunch of other folks. Um, it was anticipation of Trump's pulling out of the Conference of Parties 2015,
Yeah.
the Paris Accords.
Yeah.
So by making California 100% clean, renewable state, it wasn't just a theoretical issue. It was about how could we generate a new economy to bring working class folks into the middle class. When we talk about um, eliminating fossil fuels
Yeah.
and extraction
Mhm.
jobs, you have to do so in a manner that there is an off-ramp transition. You can't take someone and say, "Hey, you know what? I make 6 figures at an oil refinery plant. I got a good union job. I drive a Ford F-150 or a Ram Charger or a Silverado. I got a house, humble house, but I got a house nonetheless. So I'm paying a mortgage. And I'm gonna move you into a green economy and you can install solar panels, working with a nonprofit agency, and you're going to get paid slightly above the minimum wage.
Right.
I mean, you are in effect really cementing and sealing a new fervor for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
If you will.
Right.
And I think that what we witnessed and what we experienced, and obviously it's before our time in
Right.
terms of witnessing,
Yeah.
but when you go back in history, you look at these battleground states,
Hmm.
when it comes to Pennsylvania, when it comes to Ohio, when it comes to Michigan. And they're called battleground states, obviously, because at one time Democrats dominated those
That's
states.
right.
We dominated those states. And I think with the silent majority in Ronald Reagan at the time, he flipped the switch on the Democratic Party, on Democrats. And that's why these are battleground states and working class folks have l- have fled in numbers, not for the economic issues. And this is one thing that we're in danger, and we have to be very careful.
Yeah.
We can't vilify and demonize because I hear this all the time. I even
Mhm.
hear this among my friends and colleagues and elected officials all the time. How dumb these people are. They vote against their own
Interest.
interests, their own economic interests. Is it upsetting that they voted for Donald Trump? Absolutely, without a doubt. But
Let me
they
tell you
vote,
why I'm laughing,
yeah.
because I heard those arguments in the Republican Party in the 80s and the 90s. These people are just too dumb to know what's good for them. And now that they're switching voting patterns, I hear it with my Democratic friends. These people don't know what's in their best interest. They don't know why they're voting this way. And for me, it's this sense of not understanding working class folks. These are professional class people. These are people that run institutions and organizations and political parties and political entities and have power. They've got some standing. And it's remarkable. The language is the exact same of what I used to hear Republicans saying, especially about Latinos, especially about Black people. They just don't know. The Democrats want to keep them dumb. They don't know understand what's in their best interest. And now it's the exact opposite. I'm hearing the exact same language from Democrats saying the exact same thing about Black and brown people. Republicans just want to keep them dumb. They don't understand what's in their best interest. They listen to misinformation. They're misogynist culturally, they're sexist, they're racist, and
The GOP.
they're saying the GOP
Yeah.
is, and they're saying the voters are. They're saying Latinos are. And what I'm saying is the leaders in the Democratic Party sound a lot like the leaders of the Republican Party of the 80s and 90s when I grew up.